Mark Zuckerberg paid $2.5 billion for an AI startup, then China detained the founders, and now Meta has to give the money back, but they might not be able to. This isn't just a bad deal, this is the moment the global AI market officially broke in half, and nobody saw it coming. In the next 12 minutes, I'm going to walk you through the whole insane story, the startup, the founders, the $2.5 billion gamble, and why China just rewrote the rules of global tech forever. Let's start with what Manus actually is, because without understanding that, none of the rest of this makes sense. You know how ChatGPT answers your questions? Manus doesn't answer questions. It does your job. It reads your emails, screens your job applicants, books your flights, and files the report. By itself, start to finish. That's what we mean when we say AI agent, not a chatbot. Not an assistant that waits for instructions. A system that takes a task, breaks it into steps, and executes each one without you touching it. The difference sounds small until you think about the implications. Think about what that actually means for you. The AI apps you already use, the ones embedded in your phone, your browser, your workflow, are about to be decided by this story. Because who controls the underlying technology controls what those agents can do, what data they touch, and whose rules they follow. That's not an abstract geopolitical question. That's your daily life. The name actually comes from the Latin motto of MIT, mens et manus, mind and hand. That's not a marketing choice, that's a statement of intent. When they dropped the beta on March 6th, 2025, people went absolutely feral. The launch demo went viral with millions of views in less than a day. In one sequence, the agent autonomously screened 10 resumes, identified a property in New York within a specific budget, all without being prompted twice. 8 months after launch, Manus hit $100 million in annual recurring revenue. By their own account, the fastest any startup had ever reached that milestone. By the time Meta came knocking, the company had, according to their internal figures, processed 147 trillion tokens and spun up 80 million virtual computers to execute tasks. This wasn't a demo company built on a viral moment. This was a real business with real scale and a very clear ceiling above it. So who actually built it? There are two founders. And understanding who they are matters enormously, because right now, they're the most consequential people in the entire story. And this is exactly why what happens to them next is so dangerous. Xiao Hong isn't your typical AI researcher. He's a product guy, a builder. He started in the WeChat ecosystem with enterprise tools, two apps called Yiban and Weiban that eventually served over 2 million business users, backed early on by Tencent and GenFund. Before Manus, he built Monica, a browser extension that aggregated multiple AI models together for translation and summarization, and got 3 million people across the US, Japan, and South Korea using it. He's someone who obsesses over the shortest path between a technology and the person who actually needs it. Find the application, ship it fast, scale it hard. Then there's Ji Yichao, known online as Peak. This guy was on Forbes China's 30 under 30 list twice, in 2012 and 2013. He built an iPhone browser in high school. He grew up between Beijing and Colorado, which makes him exactly the kind of person that both countries want to claim as their own. Deep engineering instincts, a reputation inside the industry for what people close to him call technical fundamentalism. The idea that if the foundation isn't right, nothing built on top of it will be either. Together, they started Butterfly Effect in October 2022. 2 months later, OpenAI released ChatGPT and the AI era officially started. These guys were already building. And this background, the credibility, the scale, the global user base, is exactly what made Meta trust them enough to move fast. Here's where the story takes its first big turn, and where the first major mistake gets made. By mid-2025, Xiao and Ji could feel the geopolitical wind shifting. The US-China tech war was accelerating. Cross-border AI deals were becoming a minefield. And so they did what a growing number of Chinese-founded tech companies were doing at the time. They executed what people in the industry call Singapore washing. It's exactly what it sounds like. You build your company in China, then you reincorporate in Singapore, and suddenly on paper, you're clean. You're not a Chinese company anymore. You're a neutral Southeast Asian company that any American buyer can safely acquire without triggering a diplomatic incident. It had worked before. Many founders had done it. It was practically a playbook at this point. They raised $75 million from Benchmark, shut down their offices in Beijing and Wuhan, laid off 80 of their 120 Chinese employees, and moved the remaining technical team to Singapore. Done, clean, ready for a buyer. What they didn't count on? China doesn't care where your legal entity lives. The country's National Development and Reform Commission, the NDRC, had a very different view of the situation. Historically, the NDRC was focused on internal economic planning, infrastructure, dams, 5-year plans. But in recent years, under new leadership, it has quietly expanded into something much closer to what CFIUS is in America, a foreign investment security reviewer with real teeth. And now it was turning those teeth on Meta. If your technology was built by Chinese engineers on Chinese soil, Beijing considers it a Chinese asset, period. They call it the IP origin doctrine. Incorporation papers are secondary. What matters is where the IP was created and who created it. With that single position, the NDRC just killed the Singapore washing playbook forever. Every founder watching this story understood that the moment the directive dropped, but none of that had fully landed yet when Meta came knocking. Meta needed this deal. Zuckerberg had already sunk billions into Scale AI. He'd been building Llama. But in the agentic AI race, the race to build something that actually does your work for you, Meta was behind. Google had Jarvis, OpenAI had Operator, and Manus was the shortcut. The product was already built, already scaled, already proven. From Meta's perspective, this was a no-brainer. You don't build when you can buy, and you buy fast before someone else does. Meta announced the deal on December 30th, 2025. Reports say the whole thing took about 10 days from first conversation to signed contract. 10 days for a $2.5 billion acquisition. No regulatory clearance from China, no waiting period, they just moved. Almost immediately, 100 Manus engineers moved into Meta's Singapore offices. The technology started integrating into WhatsApp, into the ad manager. Deep integration, the kind that is very, very hard to undo. Meta's internal teams were excited. It felt like a coup. And that is where the clock started ticking down. On April 27th, 2026, the NDRC issued a directive. It prohibited, quote, foreign investment in the acquisition of the Manus project and ordered all parties to reverse the transaction, not renegotiate, not review, reverse. A deal that had already been closed for 4 months. Let that land for a second. China reached into a completed transaction on the other side of the world and said, undo it. This is the most aggressive exercise of extraterritorial regulatory power in the history of the Silicon Valley-Beijing rivalry. There is no close second. And then it got personal. In March 2026, both founders were summoned to Beijing for meetings about potential violations of foreign investment rules. After those meetings, they were banned from leaving mainland China. Exit bans, a tool Chinese authorities use to physically restrict someone's movements while an investigation is ongoing. As of right now, Xiaohong and Ji Yichao are physically unable to fly to Singapore, where 100 of their former employees are sitting inside Meta's offices. 2 people who built a $2.5 billion company banned from boarding a plane. And now Meta has a few weeks to unwind a deal it closed 4 months ago. Here's the problem. Code is already in WhatsApp. Data has already been mixed into training pipelines. Benchmark, the US venture firm, has already received its returns and distributed them to limited partners. How do you untrain an AI? How do you unpay investors who've already dispersed the cash? How do you extract technology that has already been woven into a product used by billions of people? There is no clean answer. The NDRC has given the companies only a few weeks to completely disentangle and restore the startup to its pre-acquisition state. But asking someone to unscramble an egg is easier than asking them to separate AI training data that's been merged into a live production model. A former Manus engineer in Wuhan described the NDRC's decision as more ruthless than expected, and expressed genuine fear that it could mark the beginning of a broader crackdown on any startup that tries to de-China itself. This is a legal and engineering nightmare with almost no precedent. The NDRC cited 3 specific reasons for the intervention: technology sovereignty, the loss of world-class agentic AI architecture built on Chinese soil, data sovereignty. Manus had processed enormous volumes of data from Chinese users, and control was now passing to a foreign entity. and national security. The risk of critical digital infrastructure falling under the control of a geopolitical rival. 3 red lines, all 3 crossed. Now let's zoom out, because this doesn't exist in isolation. The US banned high-end Nvidia chips from reaching China, tried to force TikTok into a sale. So China just showed that it can do the same thing in the opposite direction, reach into a completed deal on the other side of the world and unwind it. This is tit for tat. This is the logic of a Cold War applied directly to corporate transactions. Here's the number that haunts Beijing's policymakers. 87% of China's top AI researchers who go to American institutions don't come back. That's from a 2025 Carnegie Endowment study, 87%. The Manus case is a signal, a very loud one. Your talent, your technology, your IP doesn't leave, and if it tries to, we will use every tool we have to stop it. The timing also matters. The NDRC's final ban came less than a month before a planned Trump-Xi summit in Beijing. That is not a coincidence. The Manus case is leverage, a card played before a major negotiation begins. The fallout is already reshaping how founders think. People who were planning to use the Singapore washing playbook are scrapping those plans. Some are choosing to start outside of China, entirely from day one, avoiding any early R&D on mainland soil, so they never fall under the NDRC's jurisdictional net. Others are accepting that their only viable exit is a domestic Chinese IPO or an acquisition by ByteDance or Tencent. The global AI market isn't one market anymore, it's 2. And the line between them just became a wall. That wall will eventually shape which AI tools you use, who built them, and whose interests they serve. They built a $2.5 billion company, got the deal, got the wire, and now they can't leave the country that just took it back. This isn't just a business story. This is the moment the AI world split in 2, and we're all living on one side of that line whether we chose to or not. The unwinding deadline, the Trump-Xi summit, the founder's status, the legal battles, it's all still moving. If you want to stay on top of it, subscribe. I'll be covering every development as it breaks, and I want to know what you think. Drop it in the comments. Is China right to block this deal? Or is this just economic warfare dressed up as national security? See you in the next one.